So we move now on to the part of our evening where we will be listening to our keynote address. I guess this is really, we're really setting the tone tonight for the entire weekend. So I'd like you all to really, I guess I'm standing here behind a lecture, lecturing you guys to really listen. Pay attention to what's about to be said, because these are words from a very wise man who can really have some positive effect on us. So please give your warmest attention. Let me give you a little introduction. We'll be listening to the Honorable Allan Wachowich, who recently retired as Chief Justice of the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta, a position he held from December 12th, 2000 until September 30th, 2009. Al also served as the Associate Chief Justice of the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta for close to 8 years, a member of the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta for most of 36 years, and a Deputy Judge of the Yukon Supreme Court, the Northwest Territories Supreme Court, and the Nunavut Court of Justice. Don't mess with this guy. The retired Chief Justice dealt with most areas of the law during his long and distinguished judicial career, but he particularly enjoys files with insurance and insolvency dimensions and participating in the alternative dispute resolution process. I think we've got a lot of that in our community sometimes, so we can definitely use some of his words of wisdom. Al heard all Canadian commercial bank liquidation applications to the Court of the Queen's Bench of Alberta from 1985 to 2000. He was the chair of the Alberta Insurance Board from 1978 to 1993 and had an extensive insurance practice before he became judge at the 39 years of age. He was the Canadian Football League's pro bono arbitrator for 20 years. Please help me welcoming the Honorable Allan Wachowich.
He said everything that he should have said, except he didn't mention the fact that I'm a Polish prince. And how often is it that you have royalty speaking to you? Mind you, I'm self-proclaimed, and someday I'm going to hand over the title to an individual who's in this room today, and that's our Deputy Premier, because he's just now a Polish count and nothing more than that. Mr. Undersecretary, Mr. Deputy Premier, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great honor for me to be standing before you today to say a few words. And as a keynote speaker, I'm not used to being a keynote speaker. I'm used to hanging people in court and saying, "Guilty, stand up, take them away," and or picking a jury and hoping that they pick the right jury. My ambition someday, my ambition was someday to pick Thomas Lukasz's jury. I never had that chance. I would have picked him a good one. He would have probably got maybe 20 years, but that's all. Anyways, so it's a great honor for me to be here today, and it's a great honor because I'm proud to be Polish. I really am, and I want to talk about my pride in being Polish, because usually someone from my vintage whose parents came here over 100 years ago has lost their Polishness. A lot of people this has happened to a lot of people as you integrate within society, you lose your identity. Let me tell you today, in this conference, whatever you do, strengthen your identity and strengthen your pride. We have a parking lot in the basement of the courthouse, and we took down the names because of security reasons, but I kept a license plate up there, and it said, "Proud to be Polish." Everybody didn't know who parked where or who these cars belonged to, but they knew who had that car over there with that sign, because I was proud to be Polish. Security asked me to take it down. I said, "No way am I taking that down, because I'm proud to be Polish." The reason, and when you're proud of what you do, this is how you become good leaders. And I want to allude to that if I possibly can. But one of the reasons I'm proud to be Polish is because of Poland's history itself, when you think of it. And I'm just going to go through a few little things just to remind you of what a great nation your parents came from, and the values that you've inherited from the people of that great nation. And you know, because back in 1791, they established Europe's first constitution. They gave the peasants the right to vote. Only the U.S. in 1776 had a constitution before them. France was about 5 months later after Poland. And this brought real important reform upon this nation in Eastern Europe, and it changed the social life. They had a commission on national education at that time, which was completely foreign to all the other nations. They established a department of education. They got involved in setting up schools, and they were far advanced above any of the other nations that surrounded them. And as you know, the location of Poland is right in the middle, and it's surrounded by everybody. And so this nation that was building itself at that time to establish the pride that it had in itself resulted in jealousy by the neighbors. They being Russia, Prussia, Austria. They felt endangered. And by this Polish nation beside them, it resulted in 1794 with them being crushed. Thaddeus Kosciuszko, the great hero, came back and proclaimed a national insurrection and gave peasants complete freedom. They joined the army, but they couldn't stand up to the combined nation's might that surrounded them. Poland was wiped off the map for more than a century. Poles never accepted the loss of their independence, and that's the strength and the pride of that nation. It was always in their heart, and they suffered it recently, right after World War II. They did not lose their identity. They did not diminish in the sense of pride that they had. They struggled for liberty, and they struggled on a few occasions before the end of World War I. 1797, the Poles organized and fought with Napoleon. 1830, they revolted against Russia. They tried it again in 1863. They were crushed by the might of the army to the east of them. And thus, we should always remember that day of May 3rd as a very special day in the history of Poland, when it was the birth of what gave them pride and strength, and that was in the constitution that they established. It was, the meaning of all this was a symbol of freedom, and they've never lost that fight and desire for independence. There are other nations like that, and we should celebrate those days. Celebrate St. Casimir's Day on March the 4th, the patron saint. I do. I threw a party at the courthouse because they were celebrating St. Patrick's Day. I said, to hell with St. Patrick's Day. We have a day before them, March the 4th, to remind people who you are. Remember May the 6th and 7th, which is St. Stanislaus Day. Celebrated in Poland one day and Canada the next day. St. Stanislaus deserves 2 days. He was that great a saint. The Irish have their March 17th. The Scots have January 25th. The Italians have their Columbus Day. And the French have, of course, Bastille. And they do this so they can retain their identity. And it's most important when you have your conference here in Canmore that you do everything to establish within your heart to retain your identity. And it may have happened to me more by accident than by design, because there was an element and a time in my life when this country was a little bit different and this province was a little bit different because they tried to eliminate your identity. People changed their names so they could get a job. If you had a long Polish name, you probably changed it, and understandably so you could eat. I often tell that story. You know, when I was a young lawyer, my name was Walker. I changed it to Wachowich, and look at me today. You know. You can't escape your identity and maintain it and strengthen it. So celebrate it. And you have reason to celebrate it because you're indebted. You're indebted to your families. You're indebted to your families who sacrificed a lot to come over here to give you a chance. And you're all educated. You've all probably received some kind of post-education beyond high school. Your fathers and mothers sacrificed much so that you could be in Canmore tomorrow. Don't waste it. Let me tell you about my family. My grandfather was born in 1855 in a little village called Wachowich by Buchach, which was then part of Galicia, which was then part of Poland, and after the war became part of the Ukraine. He came over to this country with 6 children, and 3 more were born over here, and the last 2 being religious. The second, 1 priest, and that was the custom of the Poles. Give 1 back or 2 back to the religious. And one of them was born here. My Uncle Tom was born here, my godfather. The first one was born and baptized along the roadway. And the first Polish priest came early in the turn of the century. Hardworking people. He came to Winnipeg. First of all, in 1897, March the 21st, they landed in Halifax on a ship called the Scotsman, SS Scotsman. They went to Winnipeg, and my grandfather went down to the Dakotas to get a farm. He bought a farm, a homestead, from a German land dealer. When he got down there, he got kicked off the land because he was swindled. He came back to Winnipeg, and the 6 girls in the family, or the 5 girls in the family, were then maids in households. Stayed there for about 3 years. And they came here to Alberta in 1899 and homesteaded around Scarrow. In the winter of that year, there were 19 of them in a shack that was 900 square feet. My grandmother's sister, they had moved to the Scarrow district, and that's why they moved there. So you can imagine the sacrifice they went through, and the sacrifices that your parents have gone through. And the important thing is, don't fail them. My father was the 5th oldest in the family. He had 1 day in grade 1. Couldn't speak any English at all, but was self-educated. When he was in school, on the first day of school, the teacher couldn't speak any Ukrainian or Polish, and that's what the district was. He went up, he saw the teacher making marks on the blackboard with a piece of chalk. And my father stayed a little longer to see if that was magic or he could do it. So he took the chalk and went up the blackboard and he drew a line. And the teacher said to him, "Piece of chalk." And my father learned his first words in English because piece of chalk was a puppy dog. And that was what he learned in English. So 1 day in grade 1, and my mother went to grade 3 before 3 of her siblings died in the flu epidemic in 1917. Raised 8 children, 2 boys, girls. My brother, who was the chief judge of the provincial court, died here about 6 weeks ago. There was only 2 boys in the family. We were partners as lawyers, and 6 girls. I tell you this story because all of those 8 got a university education or equal to and 6 of them from the University of Alberta were graduates. At this time, we are one of the few families that had that many graduates from the University of Alberta. I'm not bragging. I am telling you what the sacrifice was of a Polish immigrant and what an example he set so as to allow me to succeed and to speak to you today. To become the Chief Justice in this province was no small achievement. And I'm not bragging because I just happened to be in the right spot at the right time when they chose me. I hope I served it well. I was the first Polish judge in Alberta, and I think the 3rd Polish judge in all of Canada. And no one has ever really said, "You dumb Polak," about my ability. And if they did it behind my back. But the big thing is this, is the fact that that our parents gave us a chance, our grandparents gave us a chance. They were proud of who they were. They never, ever did anything in any way to upset what might be the chance that they were given by in any way feeling sorry for themselves or being ingrates in this country. So when you're deliberating tomorrow and the next day and you're thinking about what you might do in the future, remember this, that you take your Polish background with you. You know, there's some great Poles that we can be very proud of in this, in our country, and in this world. Many of whom have left their mark. As you look around when you're seeing each other tomorrow, look around and see who's going to leave their mark and leave a big indentation upon the history of this province and maybe this country. Because by you gathering together, you're giving your chance to do exactly that, that's to leave a mark. And you leave a mark that also shows your nationality and your identity. And you might even do so internationally. We have distinguished members here today who are leaving their mark. It's no small achievement that within 100 years, more or less, that the Deputy Premier of this province was born in Poland and has done a remarkable job. And when he came here, that was the furthest thing from his mind. But he applied himself, and he never forgot who he was. And don't you ever forget who you are. Because the people who have succeeded are the people who remembered who they were. August Globensky, 1776, was the first Pole to come to Canada. Gazowski, the famous Gazowski family, an engineer, built the bridge over the International Falls, Niagara Falls. We all know about Copernicus. We know about Kosciuszko. We know about Pulaski. Pulaski, the great general. Washington would have never won that war in 1776 if it wasn't for Pulaski. You read history, you'll find that out. Joseph Conrad, the famous writer. Frédéric Chopin. We all know his music. And we have a brilliant young pianist in this city who plays Chopin, who's really making his mark, and started to make his mark when he was 5 years of age, and is now an international pianist. Madame Curie, Paderewski, and others. So commemorate this occasion, and in years to come look back and say, I planted a seed within myself when I was in Canmore. I planted a seed within myself where I can hope to achieve greatness. I planted a seed where I can say to my parents, I did not fail you. And in this way, you repay them for the sacrifices that they have made in your behalf and the encouragement that they provided. And remember, we must remind ourselves that we are the next generation and we are answerable for what we do. So it's most important that you come here, first of all, being proud of being a Polish Canadian. But when you leave Canmore, I hope that you can all stand up and say, I have a much greater sense of pride in the fact that I am a Polish Canadian, and I pledge unto myself that I always will be that, a Polish Canadian who left his mark or her mark and will always appreciate what this country has done for us and what Poland has done for all of us historically and what our parents have done for us in particular. May God bless all of you.